Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Pro Soccer Talk. I'm your host, Joe Prince Wright, and as you can see, Nick Mendola in Buffalo, New York, and Andy Edwards in Kansas City are with us today. Gents, another great week in the Premier League, some big wins, big results, a lot of teams getting big wins at the top of the table. It's very tight up there. So, Nick Mendola, firstly to you, mate, what did you enjoy over the last week in the Premier League?
I wouldn't say I enjoyed it too much. I'm kidding. I loved it. I loved seeing everything about Newcastle looking good against Everton. I like when a team that you think has potential delivers way above your expectations. And Everton was down a man or down two men, and there's reason to be concerned. But I loved seeing a nice little punchy story get a good win.
Andy, what about you, sir?
We're starting to see a little separation, I think. I'm looking at the table here. Of the top 11 teams this weekend, only 2 of them failed to win. Of the bottom 9 teams, 1 of them won. So we are starting to see, maybe not in the points totals, but I think teams starting to kind of figure out who they are, and we're figuring out who they are and who's going to be top of the table, who's top half, who's going to be top 8, who's top 6, who's top 4, who's really in the title race.
And I think that's been one of the big factors of the first few weeks of the season, right? We didn't quite know what was going to happen, but now we're starting to get some kind of idea of what's going to happen. So I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to grab a sip of this beer. And if you're new to PST, we have a beer, we have a chat about all things soccer. And let's crack on, boys. First big story this week, Christian Pulisic and his injury status. The latest news is up on ProSoccerTalk and NBCSports.com. I was in the press conference with Frank Lampard, who gave the latest update on Pulisic and said it's a very small, minor injury. Of course, pulled out of Chelsea's starting lineup before the game against Burnley. Had a tweak in his hamstring, which Lampard said isn't a big deal. He's very relieved at that. But gents, we all love Christian Pulisic. I want to start by saying that. He is the biggest hope American soccer has ever had. And it's wonderful to see him on the pitch. And we do not like to see him out on the sidelines like we have, quite frankly, too often in the last 12 to 18 months. Not even before he was at Chelsea as well. He had these issues at Dortmund. So with these issues piling up, should we start to be a bit worried here, Nick? Because I'm looking at the comments from Lampard. He's talking about we have to manage him. We have to ease his workload. I mean, he's 22 years of age. He's had a very big career already. But should we be worried about Pulisic long term here?
Long term, maybe. Maybe his prime might be a concern, but I think it's important to note that not being available all the time is not unique. He's our star right now, so it feels dire, and it makes you think of Andy Carroll or Jack Wilshere. But it's easy to forget Robin van Persie and Arjen Robben. They missed a lot of games and were still dynamic attacking players well into their 30s. Would you take them on your national team? You surely would. So managing means you've got an explosive guy with a rare physical skill set, and he needs special care. So for now, it's reason to keep it in the back of your head, but we'll be fine.
Yeah, Andy, what about you?
Yeah, I'll do something that I typically don't like to do, and so I'll frame it as a question. I don't like to try to get into, a player's mental state or inside their head, what they're thinking or what they're feeling. But I do begin to wonder, at what point does he get a little frustrated with these consistent injuries that keep creeping up for him? Because as soon as he went down there in warmups on the weekend, immediately punching the ground, immediately the bib is off and throwing it down. He knew immediately. So he is now to the point where he can feel any little thing and know that it's going to be an issue for him, because he's been through this before. It's been enough times now that he just knows. And so, I don't want him to get frustrated, because I think then you run the risk of pushing yourself too hard, and that's only going to lead to even worse things down the road. So, it really is, I think, going to be down to the medical staff there at Chelsea to get him on a plan that is going to maximize, what he is able to handle and give on a physical level.
And it's kind of similar injuries, right? I've seen a lot of like upper leg, like hamstring is a reoccurrence, adductor, thigh, that kind of area there. So obviously it's to do with his incredible pace, his acceleration. Lampard's talked about that in depth. Again, it's on ProSoccerTalk at NBCSports.com. He said they're trying to mold the training program to make sure they reduce those injuries and that he doesn't get frustrated and he doesn't get injured, because he is a very important player for Chelsea. Let's not beat about the bush here. But I wanted to say as well, how can he possibly adapt his game? Because as an Englishman, I grew up watching Michael Owen rip it up for the first 5-6 years of his career. then he just had consistent hamstring injuries. We all hope that doesn't happen with Christian because of his pace, because of the way he played. And then his career just fizzled out. He could never really adapt or change. That was his game changer. Andy, for you, can Pulisic maybe do something a bit different? Could he change, move centrally maybe rather than being out in the wing? What can he do to kind of manage this better?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as much a positional thing as maybe it's just kind of his age at the moment as well. We do forget because he is the star that he's 22 now. And so physically, he's not totally done developing. And I fully appreciate that this reference might be lost on some people here listening to this. I can't think of one from the soccer world at the moment off the top of my head. But Bradley Beal in the NBA for the first 5 or 6 years of his career, injury after injury after injury, was continuing to grow and fill out and develop physically, hit 24, 25, 26 years old, all NBA player every single year once those injuries went away, had the injury bug tag on him. So I maybe a little bit of patience, I guess, could potentially get us through this with Pulisic because obviously the talent is there, the explosiveness is there. He just needs to find a way to kind of harness that, within the limits, I guess, of what his body is going to allow him to do.
Nick, if he's out again, I mean, he's only going to be out a short time now, but he's been out a few times now for Chelsea for multiple months with different injuries. Are they better set up now to cope without Pulisic? Because he's been so good for them since the start of this season. I mean, I'm looking around at Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi, Werner, Havertz, Mount. It's not like they don't have enough players, right, to cope without Pulisic, as bad as that would be for US fans and for Chelsea.
They're going to find goals. Werner is a stud. Ziyech looks like the truth. Havertz is adapting. Young guy, new country, but I have zero doubts about him in the long term. And even Mason Mount, who's been flawed in consistency, is still a guy who couldn't get an assist a game. So I'm not worried about their attack. I'd be more worried. There's less depth behind Timo Werner. So I think they're going to be fine. They'd love to have him there because he is maybe closer to Ziyech, but that's about it in terms of guys that crafty.
And we'll obviously get to potentially see Pulisic back on the pitch in the Premier League this weekend against Sheffield United, which you can watch on Saturday, 12:30 Eastern at Stamford Bridge. But then we maybe get to see him in the US national team jersey for the first time in a long time. He's been called up by Greg Berhalter in a very youthful squad. He's only called up European players for games in Wales against Wales and in Austria against Panama. So those two friendlies are coming up. The US national team haven't gotten together for a long time, only once previously in 2020, and that was right at the very start with the US North American-based players. So this is going to be a very interesting squad. And Nick, I know there's a few new boys there you want to keep your eye on because I think there's 10 uncapped players in this 24-man roster that Greg Berhalter, and a lot of them are at really big clubs in Europe, aren't they?
Yeah, you're at a point where you're saying names almost for the first time and hoping you get them right. The most exceptional one on the list in terms of catching people's eyes, Yunus Musa from Valencia. Doesn't turn 18 until November 29th. Arsenal guy, had 5 goals and 3 assists for them in PL2, but 22 times for England between U15 and U19. Scored his first senior goal, La Liga versus Getafe yesterday. So this is a kid who's going to be, again, 18 at the end of the month. Really exciting. Other guys, we know their names. Owen Odasoe is with Wolves. He's been named to their bench a few times. So a Premier League guy. Another one who isn't near Leicester's first team yet, although he's trained with them, is Chituru Adunze, who we've seen in, I believe, the U19 World Cup. And then you've got Johnny Cardoso, who's playing in Brazil. Richie Ledesma, we know a bit more about these guys. And even a guy, I have no prayer of saying his name right, Nicolas Giacchini from Caen down in France's second tier. So very exciting team. I think a lot of those guys we probably see in the Panama game and a lot of the big names we see against Wales.
Yeah, Andy, there's still a lot of big players there. Obviously, first time we're going to get to see the likes of Gio Reyna, Pulisic, McKennie, Adams, all in the same squad together. I just want another point on this. The roster will have an average age of 21 years and 300 days. So it's an extremely young team. But what are you looking for out of this US national team side?
Yeah, it's kind of incredible that we've been doing this Gio Reyna thing as the future thing for so long, but he has 0 caps for the U.S. It's just not happened for him yet, I guess, at this point. But so that's obviously something to really look forward to. He has proven that just the conveyor belt of talent at Dortmund is a really, really beneficial thing for the U.S. men's national team, and we need to try to get as many players there as we can to do their development at that club. I'm kind of looking at this defense here, though, and thinking about the entire player pool as well, and thinking about World Cup qualifying whenever that's going to begin, and the World Cup as well, and thinking, do we have any good defenders? I think we've got a couple pretty good fullbacks that we've developed, which is a position that we've not had for a very long time. But center back is a real worry for me at the moment. John Brooks is still going to be relied on, and he's in this squad as kind of the centerpiece of that defense, and it's just never happened for him, at least on the international level to this point. So I'm a little worried defensively. Chris Richards, he's going to need maybe a big leap forward to kind of, obviously take a starting spot in the national team, but to be an impact player that we need there on the back line.
And of course, we'll have you covered here on Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com. USA are playing at Wales and in Austria against Panama. We'll have you covered with analysis and news from the international break as the USA are finally back to playing, and it's going to be interesting to see Pulisic, McKennie, Reyna, Adams, all of those big boys leading a young group of players underneath them. So, yeah, absolutely buzzing for that, lads. Next topic I know that Andy is particularly buzzing to talk about is, are Tottenham the real deal, gents? We've got, 7 weeks into the season. I feel like we spoke about it in the summer a little bit, and now that we can kind of see the cogs are turning, the Mourinho machine is clicking into place at Spurs. Andy, title talk is starting to grow around Tottenham. I'm just going to say simply, are they for real? Are they title contenders this season?
Yeah, I love this time of year because we do this every year, and it's always with Spurs as well, isn't it? Because they'll get off to a decent little start. You'll look at the squad and think, okay, there could be something there. In lieu of actually answering the question, I'm going to put out the evidence, and I'll let you two guys kind of kick it back and forth. Is it a yes? Is it a no? Because, I think everybody can probably figure out where I'm going to fall. But if we go back a couple months to the start of the season and ask ourselves, all right, what has to happen for Spurs to have a chance to challenge for the title this season? Well, with kind of two nailed on favorites to start the season for the title, the best and most important player on the defending champions, maybe he doesn't play most of the season. Maybe he picks up a big injury, and that kind of brings them down a peg. And last season's runners-up, let's say they start, kind of for their standard, tragically slow and poor. Maybe they've got a bunch of injuries as well. And so that opens up the field a little bit for someone to step in. You need an opportunity to begin with. So what does that tell you? Okay, somebody's going to step in. Maybe it's Spurs. Then on the Spurs side of things, what do they have to do? Harry Kane has to be healthy for the first time in almost 5 years. He's got to be scoring goals. All right. They need a second consistent source of goals in that team as well. It can be Gareth Bale. It can be Son Heung-min. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg needs to channel the ghost of Sandro Ranieri. Now, there is a name that I've not said for a long time or thought about, but he came to me this week as I was thinking about the Spurs team, and that's who Højbjerg reminds me of in that Spurs team. He needs to own that midfield going both ways. So far, so good for Spurs. And then last but not least, I think they need to be to defend like a classic Mourinho team. And that part hasn't happened yet. Now, it still could. There's plenty of time left in the season, plenty of points still to be won. But the point is, they came into the season needing kind of a half dozen really big, important things to go their way, internally and externally. And we're 2 months into the season, and I'd say they're about 80% of the way to those things happening at this point.
Nick, Andy mentioned there about defensively. I mean, I'm watching this Tottenham team, especially against Burnley and Brighton the last few games. They found a way. They have that extra edge, the grittiness with Højbjerg in midfield. They're just getting over the line. Of course, having Gareth Bale to bring off the bench to score the winner against Brighton, that's not a bad sub to have. But for you, is that going to be the difference here? Because we see Mauricio Pochettino on TV here in England this week. Lovely bloke, did wonderful things with Tottenham, but maybe just didn't have that extra nous to get them to the trophy they wanted to win, to the title, to get further in Europe each season. So is the Mourinho factor, Nick, for you, is that key to all of this and unlocking Tottenham's potential?
For sure. And for all the headaching perhaps about their defense, they've allowed 9 goals. 1 was that stupid penalty against Newcastle that shouldn't have been. 3 were from a West Ham anomaly, including a rocket at the end. So they've come back to win a couple times. They haven't lost from a winning position. Those are all Mourinho things. I mean, they're soccer things too. I'm not trying to give him too much credit, but look, it's going to fall apart at some point with him, but it doesn't have to be this season. It doesn't have to be next one. He's still a brilliant mind. He, in that documentary, he went out of his way to basically tell these guys they needed to be jerks. And you are definitely seeing a bit more of that.
Absolutely. And Nick, I know there's something we've spoken about as well, but they've got some huge games coming up, right, in November and December.
Unreal.
The games they have coming up now. This is really the crux of it. We're going to find out if they can sustain this title push, right?
Yeah, what's the target for points? That's what I want to know. Home to City, at Chelsea versus Arsenal. They could go into that game against City after the international break in first place if they beat West Brom this weekend and Liverpool drops points at all because of superior goal differential. So the target will then be on their back. And look, Mourinho knows about being in first place as well. So it'll be very interesting. What's the target for points?
Andy, I don't want to use the term Spursy too much, but what is different about this Spurs team in your opinion, to wrap up this segment? What do you feel is different about watching Tottenham this season so far?
Yeah, I think you alluded to it. They seem to, at least early on, have a bit of a different mentality, and they don't seem to fold in the difficult situations that they have done so in the past. And that's not a slight on Mauricio Pochettino. I guess that's a credit to Jose Mourinho. I can't believe I'm sitting here doing that at this point. I know, but I think you do have to give him credit, because that was the thing for a number of years. When you mentioned Spursy, it was always the big moment, the bright lights. Everybody's looking at them, expecting something of them. The worst thing you could do to Spurs for a long time was expect something of them, and then they would just always fail to deliver. It's like they never really expected it of themselves, and it was just kind of happening to them rather than they were making it happen. And it feels like they're a little bit more kind of in control of what their destiny is going to be for this season. And now that has the potential to blow up at some point, given the way that Mourinho has kind of conducted himself at recent jobs. But I think there is a different mentality, and Harry Kane being healthy, I keep coming back to that. If he plays 35 games this season, they are absolutely in the title race. There is no way that they're not in the top four if he plays 35 games, because he's going to get 25 goals. Him and Son together might get 40 between the two of them.
I feel like we're going to be talking about a lot of title contenders this season in the next few months, because there's a lot of teams jostling for position there. Chelsea, even Arsenal are making the stance. And of course, Liverpool, Man City are the favourites. But there's a lot of teams there just in that pack underneath that really could make a run if, as we think, Man City are going to be inconsistent, Liverpool struggling at the back. There's an opportunity there for sure. So Tottenham are playing West Brom this weekend. That's another game where they really need to roll their sleeves up and do the dirty work. And that's the kind of games where you win by one goal, you sneak it 1-0, 2-1, like they have been, that really win you the title. So let's wait and see what happens. But we'll have you covered anything to do with the title race and, of course, Tottenham over at ProSoccerTalk on NBCSports.com. Gents, talking about the title race, there's clearly two teams in it and have been in it for the last few seasons, neck and neck, Manchester City, Liverpool. It's a huge game on Sunday coming up at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. We're going to do something a bit different here. We're going to do a combined 11. So I'm going to pick the defenders, the four defenders. We're going to play a 4-3-3. Andy, you're going to go to midfield. And Nick, you're going to have the hard task of trying to pick three strikers.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And then we'll just decide a goalkeeper between us. So firstly, I'll kick this off with my back four. I'm going to go with Alexander-Arnold, right back. I'm going to go with Aymeric Laporte as one of the centre-backs. And I'm going to go with Virgil van Dijk as the other centre-back. I know he's injured, but we're doing the best possible 11 from Man City and Liverpool. But if we are, saying Van Dijk, we're not going to use it, then I would put Ruben Diaz in there, because I've been really impressed with what he's done. And I think he's better than the other centre-back options that Liverpool have. And then Andy Robertson at left-back, even though João Cancelo's had a really good start to the season. And not obviously a recognised left-back, really, at Man City. I think Robertson, Alexander-Arnold, you have to have that back four. So any arguments with that? And Andy, I'm going to pass it over to you to select your three midfielders, but I think that's a good back four.
Yeah, nobody can argue with the fullbacks. I'm not a person in the world. Diaz, though, I find that a little bit interesting. Not somebody who's been in England and the Premier League for a little bit longer and has kind of has seen all of the teams, I guess. I think that's the biggest thing with defenders coming over, is seeing everybody once or twice and just having an understanding of who and what the league is all about. Big game like this, I would maybe be a little bit worried about him being maybe not found out, but targeted just a little bit by Liverpool.
No, I don't think so. I think when you look at the other options, Joe Gomez, Joe Matip, Fabinho even slotting back there, I think we're looking at it for a combined 11. I would be very happy with Diaz being there. If, Van Dijk's in there, he's in the team. But Aymeric Laporte, for me, is brilliant as well, brings out the best in him. So that partnership together is really good. So, Andy, your three midfielders.
Yeah, I think this one's pretty straightforward, and maybe I'm way off base here, and you guys will tell me. I think it's Jordan Henderson at the base, kind of sitting there in front of the back. I considered Fabinho, but just it didn't quite fit with what I was wanting to do a little bit further up the field. So I went for also Thiago Alcantara and, of course, Kevin De Bruyne. I don't think anybody can argue that. It's a nice little balance, I think, between a little bit of shielding the back line there, some good building out of the back, and then a couple of the kind of, to borrow a phrase from Pep Guardiola, a couple of free eights playing ahead of him.
Wow. Hey, I will take a little umbrage with that. I would love to see.
Here we go.
Thiago and KDB, no doubt, zero doubt. I like Rodri or Fabinho over Henderson. Okay. Henderson had an outstanding season last year, and I don't want to take that away from him. And I know he's a great leader, and you can't take that away from him either. But Rodri gives you that sort of a double sort of situation with Thiago. Both guys can control the game and pull the strings and give De Bruyne the chance to fly up there. And then Fabinho if you needed a harder man. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, three words. Big game experience.
Sure.
So we're going to stick with your three, Andy. Nick, you happy enough? I know Henderson, the Sunderland connection there. Is that maybe what the edge to you?
Is it? I don't know. No, it's not. It's not. But it is. All right.
You happy to commit to Henderson, De Bruyne, and
absolutely.
Thiago?
Oh, he's a great player. Great player.
Okay, so those three, that's the midfield sorted. The easy part now, Nick. Pick the forward three.
Yeah. So Salah is the easy part for me. Mohamed Salah, I think, has been phenomenal. The Sadio Mane discussion, when people start to say, is he Liverpool's most valuable attacker, I think is usually done in the same way that we try to think of, better bands than the Beatles or whatever from the 60s. Salah is just phenomenal, a wonderful player. I think center forward's easy too. It's Sergio Aguero for now. I know he's older, and I know he may not necessarily play for a couple of weeks, but he's there. So it comes down to Sterling and Mane. And 2 seasons ago, it's not a question for me. It's Raheem Sterling. But last season, Mane was absolutely unbelievable and earned those discussions of should he be the guy. And early this season, it's Mane in a runaway. So I would go Salah, Aguero, Sadio Mane.
Andy, any complaints for that?
No, I don't think you really can. I too would go Mane just ahead of Sterling for the consistency factor. And that's always kind of been the thing for Sterling when he's at his 9 or 10 out of 10 kind of performance. There's 1 or 2, maybe 3 players better than him in the world, but he just has those dips for a period of time where he'll fall just a little bit below that level, and you can't always count on him to put away the easiest of chances either. And I can recall a couple of very, very easy sitters missed by Sterling, and for some reason those just stick in my head, and I can't look past them in the context of a conversation between these two players.
Lyon in the Champions League, guys. I mean, that game goes to extra time, and they probably go on. That was a big moment.
Mane would have probably scored that. I mean, he's missed some sitters maybe a little bit, but he's more clinical. He's improved that side of his game. I almost want to go with a 4-2-2-2 formation, seeing that, so we can kind of squeeze Sterling in there, because I think it is harsh. But okay, to finish up our combined 11 between Man City and Liverpool, goalkeeper, Alisson or Ederson, which one of the Brazilian powers do we put in goal there? Because they're both great. I would probably lean towards Alisson just because I think he's done it over a longer period of time and at Roma before he got to Liverpool and made such a big difference. But Ederson did too. It's difficult. His distribution, the way that Man City asked him to play. But I'm going to lean towards Alisson. Guys, I mean, let's vote on this. I'm going for Alisson.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, I would too. I think both are better suited to their system. But if you were going to plop a guy down into a random team, then I choose Alisson.
I just feel a little safer with him back there than Ederson, right? Ederson might come out 50 yards to try to sweep the ball up, and who knows what's going to happen then.
Yeah, but Pep Guardiola would be delighted with that because he has an extra holding midfielder who can then convert to a wing back and forth. Yeah, so okay, that's done. I mean, there was a few disagreements there, but I think overall it's quite difficult to do this because the combined 11 always seems to get a lot of conversation going. By the way, in the comment section below, let us know what you think. Put in your combined Man City Liverpool 11 ahead of that massive game this Sunday at 11:30 Eastern Time. And to recap, here's who we picked. We picked Alisson in goal, Alexander-Arnold at right back, Laporte and Virgil van Dijk at centre back, even though Van Dijk's injured, but that's fine. Robertson left back, midfield three of Thiago Alcantara, Jordan Henderson, and Kevin De Bruyne, and the front three of Mohamed Salah, Aguero, and Mane. So I have it that Liverpool have 7 players, Man City have 4. So that's kind of where we're at, right? I think that's pretty fair reflection on where the two teams are at. But yeah, really intrigued to see how these two teams play this weekend. And I'm going to just one word answer. Who do you want to manage this team? Klopp or Guardiola? Nick?
You kidding? Give me Pep, but only to be contrarian because you're both saying Klopp.
Joe, I think we could give you that team and they'd be all right. That's my pick.
Hey, I would take that team to new levels. I'm telling you now. No. Yeah, I would probably go with Klopp. I think the way that, especially the front three there, the one thing that Klopp really hasn't had is a really prolific central striker. I'd love to see if that Aguero in that team. That would be pretty cool. Just like he had at Dortmund back in the day. Those strikers there. So yeah, really enjoyed that, lads. That was brilliant. Moving on swiftly to Matchweek 8 in the Premier League. We'll have previews, team news, stream links, anything you need on Pro Soccer Talk about all the games coming up this weekend before the international break kicks in. I'm going to start by previewing that big game, Man City Liverpool. As we said, Sunday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. For me, this is the real it's early season, but it still is a statement. It's a marker. It's for Man City. Have we got over our early season inconsistency? For Liverpool, can we fully cope without Virgil van Dijk, especially with Sergio Aguero looking like he could be back for this one? That's huge team news for Man City. So I'm looking at this as a great battle that we've seen over the last few seasons. These teams are so close. There's not much between them, boys. But I think that right now we're going to see extra motivation from both these sides to say, you know what, all the problems everyone's been talking about us early in the season, they're not there. This is the level we're at. So, Nick, what do you think about this game? What's your sort of prediction for how it's going to unfold? Because these games have been bizarre the last few years. You've had blowout wins for City, same for Liverpool. But when you look at the 90 minutes of football, they've actually all been quite close, apart from a magic moment or one player really stepping up and delivering goals galore in these games.
Well, we know that it usually matters a lot on the table. And that's why I think that depends a lot on the conditions at the table. And that's why I like it happening this early. You may get a truer sense of the game. Klopp has, in recent years against City, not let the dogs out for the whole game. We know he likes to attack, but people don't like to say this about him because it goes against his Buccaneer personality, but he will play smart and defensive. And will we see that, or will he say, listen, everybody knows I don't have Van Dijk. Let's just go for it and see what happens and try and win 4-3. So I'm going to be guided on how I feel who will win the game in the first 10 minutes based on how Klopp plays it. I think City wins this game by virtue of health, by virtue of having less of a test during the week. Atalanta is going to be harder than Olympiacos. So I'm very interested to see how Jurgen Klopp plays this game.
Andy, what about you? Quick one before Nick moves on to his next game. But as someone who's watched these teams closely over the last few years, who do you think is in a better position right now in terms of being that title contender or title winner this season?
Yeah, I think you just get a true sense of who a team is when they're going through their difficult patch of a season, and the fact that they're both kind of going through one at the same time is rare. Very rarely when you've got a title race that, one will start well, one will start poorly, then they'll finish kind of the opposite, and they'll meet in the middle. They've both started a little bit rough, and I know Liverpool are sitting top of the table, but only West Brom have conceded more goals than them, and as PST's resident West Brom watcher, That's bad company to be in. You don't want to be in that company. And then City, all the injuries and everything that they've had and where they're sitting in the table, it's not, it's been anything but pretty from them. And that's what we've kind of come to expect from Guardiola's teams over the years. So, who can kind of just, manage the trials and tribulations that they've had early in the season, and then facing off, head to head against one another, who can put that aside and say, this is arguably the biggest game of the entire season. 3 points here goes a long, long way to either Liverpool kind of leaving Man City behind a little bit in the table, or City closing a lot of space in between those two for the 30 games that'll be remaining after.
Big game this Sunday, 11:30 Eastern time. Man City, Liverpool, two giants collide, two teams who've dominated the Premier League in recent seasons. Let's see if they can get over those early season struggles and start producing their best form. So Nick Mendola, Everton against Man United. Those are two teams that have been struggling in recent weeks. They're facing off 7:30 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday at Goodison Park. What are you looking for in this one, mate?
Everton's last game without Richarlison. They also won't have Luka Dean. James, we don't quite know yet, or at least where he's going to be. So Everton's hopes are very much in the we have Carlo and you don't camp. And maybe in the United is coming back from Turkey camp. So this is a good chance to see if Everton's unencumbered fixture list can give it an edge. One other thing I want to note, absolutely tumultuous summer and fall and start of the season for Harry Maguire. I think he's been very good with the exception of the Azpilicueta play that didn't get called for a penalty since. So between him and Lindelof, have they found a nice little mix to deal with Dominic Calvert-Lewin?
That's true. Obviously, the Pogba issues aside, against Arsenal, conceded a penalty kick, but they were largely solid. Arsenal didn't cause them too many problems, but they need to figure out that midfield and that attacking unit, I think, to get it firing again. Because I think after the Tottenham result, they've gone too far the other way, right? They've gone too defensive. They've been less able to get on the ball in dangerous areas. Bruno Fernandes looks very frustrated because he just isn't getting any kind of support there. But, having watched Everton closely the last few weekends, this is a very good time to play Everton. That said, though, they will be wanting to kind of react and get back to their best. I think Ancelotti now, we're just kind of seeing them regress to where they are, which is at best 6th or 7th place team, not the top 4 or title challengers that many had them down as after the first month of the season. So Andy Edwards, Chelsea against Sheffield United. That's a sneaky good game. I mean, Chelsea have improved a lot. Sheffield United have been very unlucky, I would argue. They've a lot of 1-goal defeats so far. Haven't been great going forward, but what is your take on this game at Stamford Bridge?
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Sheffield United. And I know they were kind of obviously the promoted team who finished really well last season, and the inverted center backs and Chris Wilder and the story. And there was just so much to love about that. And so we go into the off season, that brief as it was, with, okay, they'll just continue right on as if this thing works, in a linear fashion, and it doesn't. And they've been really poor. They've got a point. They have 1 point. Yes. And I'm looking here, and since Nick hasn't gone to the expected goals this week, I'll do it for him. 4th from bottom in terms of expected goals for. Really, really poor. Now, defensively, they're still pretty solid. They're 2nd from the top in terms of fewest expected goals against. And so they've got a foundation to build on, I think, at this point. And maybe playing Chelsea a little bit early in the season while there's still some of the kind of gelling together going on with that very new team put together, and injury to Pulisic and everything. Maybe it's a decent time for them to get something out of this game and kind of kickstart their season. But more than anything, we just need to see a performance from them. They've just not even put together a performance this season that makes you think, okay, they're struggling right now. They're going to come out of this and they're going to find their way.
So the blades have been blunt so far. Chelsea haven't been anything but that, have they? I mean, they've got Hakim Ziyech coming in, Werner scoring goals, Hudson-Odoi playing well. Obviously, Pulisic battling back from injury, hopefully for this game this weekend. Tammy Abraham, Giroud, they have a lot of attacking options, so we should see a lot from Chelsea in that game. I got my eye on a few other games. Arsenal against Aston Villa. Let's see if Arsenal can build on that win at United. Villa kind of slumping a little bit, even though Jack Grealish is doing his best to hold things together. Leicester against Wolves, big Midlands derby. Those two teams have started the season really well, and everyone's kind of forgotten about them. But again, they must be licking their chops and think we got a chance of being in the top 4 here this season. There's definitely a couple of spots up for grabs there. And then the third PST derby of the season, Southampton against Newcastle down at St Mary's. Both those teams are getting nasty nosebleeds from being way too high in the table early in the season. But yeah, definitely intrigued to watch those games. So all the full schedule, team news, betting odds, anything else you need ahead of the Premier League weekend, we'll have you covered on Pro Soccer Talk. All that's left for me to say is thanks for joining us, gents. Pleasure as always to grab a beer with you guys. Enjoy the action, and we'll speak to you all very soon. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe. Make sure you subscribe to watch highlights all season long and always join us every weekend at 7 a.m. on NBCSN for Premier League mornings. Plus, make sure you subscribe to Peacock Premium as well, where you can watch exclusively live 175 games and same-day on-demand replays of all 380 Premier League matches as well.